Good evening, friends. This is Dr. Vijay Agarwal. I'm the president of CAHO, Consortium of Accredited Healthcare Organizations, and we are committed to safer patient care. Friends, fire safety has been a very important issue for all healthcare organizations. To sensitize healthcare organizations for fire safety, even in normal times, has been a big challenge. And we have been working very hard on that. But this challenge has become multifold. It has multiplied much more during this COVID pandemic. And therefore, we thought that it is very important at this time to sensitize everyone because the normal practices of the fire control may have to be modified and we need to revisit it. So to discuss this important topic, and in this webinar today, I have the pleasure of introducing one of the very renowned person in the field, Mr. Pankaj Rajendra Dharkar. Mr. Pankaj Dharkar is a renowned MEP and green building consultant, an ASHRAE and IGBC fellow, provides innovative and sustainable solutions in the field of building engineering services. During his rich experience of 40 years, he has successfully designed and completed more than 4,000 projects of various applications. He is a member of various technical committees, friends. He is also a presidential member of ASHRAE headquarter, ASHRAE WI chapter, and Fire and Security Association of India, and he is the immediate past international president of FSAI. He is currently national chair of FSAI Suraksha Index, that is the first global index to rate safety and security of buildings, which will help in proper fire audits, and also chairman of FSAI COVID Task Force. He is also currently chairman of SHM GEM program in India. So it is really an honor and pleasure for us to have Mr. Pankaj Rajendra Dharkar today to chair and moderate this session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, and good evening to everyone. And what a great evening today. And thanks to CAHO and Dr. Lalu Joseph for giving me an important position for today evening's program. I think I'm blessed with many doctors and also Dr. D.K. Shami. Prabhat-ji is just going to join us for some time, but eminent personalities, and I'm really humbled with your decision. This is a very, very sensitive and important subject, specifically when it is coming during the COVID time. We have seen some unfortunate incidences, and I think we are going to discuss them and understand how can we minimize such incidences. And we are really fortunate to have such eminent knowledge. I think if I was just going through the profiles of all the eminent personalities, and I could, when I kind of compiled them, I thought it is a 200 years of wisdom which is available today with the panelists, and this is fantastic. And specifically in hospitals, they have great experiences. So without not taking much of time, let me start introducing my panelists. To start with, Dr. D.K. Shami Saab. He's a member secretary of Standing Fire Advisory Committee. He's also having more than 38 years of experience in industrial, state, central fire services, including advisory role in Government of India. He is a chairman and member of BIS committees, member of OISD standing committees, member secretary of Standing Fire Advisory Committee, and many more. So I'm really delighted. I'm not reading out biodatas which are running in five pages. I'm just giving you a brief, and I'm sure when you interact with them, you are going to learn a lot. So welcome, Dr. D.K. Shami sir. Next, Mr. Vinod Kumar ji, Vinod Kumar KB. He is a head consultant, VBG Consulting Engineers, MEP Design Consultancy and Project Management Consultancy Services. He's coming from Kerala, and some of the complicated and ongoing projects for specific clients include Rajagiri Hospital, Kinder Hospital, Kim's Hospital, Kraft Hospital, Sankara Eye Hospital, TM Hospital, and recently, as a CAO representative, he kind of audited our FSAI Suraksha Index checklist, which we prepared for hospitals. So I started interacting with him very recently, and it is a great pleasure to have you, Vinodji, with you. And we are going to have a lot of interesting questions as engineer to you. Next, I would like to introduce Kirti D'Souza. She is partner and managing director, Life Giver Professional Services consulting firm. Seeds of Sustainability. She's director, Seeds of Sustainability in NGO Executive Committee, chair Sustainability and Community Initiatives, Global Society of HSE Professionals, executive forum member, Dialogue Health Digital Magazine, co-chairman, chairperson for CAHO Student Research Committee and consortium of accredited healthcare organizations. So welcome Kirti this evening. Next, I am also blessed with presence of Dr. Vikramjit Singh ji. He is head of emergency department, coming from all the way from Fortis Hospital, Mohali. So you can see we have speakers coming right from North Chandigarh to South Kerala. So we are really blessed with eminent personalities today. Next, we have with us Professor T. Samuel Ravi Kumar, and he is a trauma center coordinator at CMC Vellore. He has great clinical experiences, disaster management response team members and coordinator. He has done some fantastic work during for the Blambast, which Tamil Nadu Explosives Limited, tsunami response team, Nepal earthquake. He has done fantastic work during the Chennai flood and cyclone response. Also, multiple mass casualty management emergency department, CMC Vellore. He has been constantly working, and again, he has assisted developing protocols for COVID-19 response team. Thank you, sir, for being with us. And next we have Dr. Lalu Joseph. We are all here today because of her. So she is quality manager and associate general superintendent at CMC Vellore, secretary general consortium of accredited healthcare organization CAHO, and she manages the quality of services in domain of medical, nursing, support services, and this is done by means of audit system, studies, round accreditation, training, and internal inspiration. And it is always pleasure to hear Madam Dr. Lalu Joseph. So I think this was a brief introduction. I did not do it justice. I know the time is short, and we would like to have a very interactive session with all of you present today. We're going to request all our speakers going one by one, giving their opinions and talking briefly on the subject for 5 minutes. And then I'm going to take up some questions. Let us have this interactive session going. So starting from Dr. D.K. Shami, please, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thanks to CAHO and particularly to Dr. Lalu Joseph for inviting me as speaker or panelist of this particular session. Friends, Government of India is issuing advisories since long, and even after Amri, we further started pushing hard for the implementation of fire safety measures in the hospitals. But I really feel sorry to say that all the advisories, all the guidelines issued by us is not bringing any fruitful result. This you can see by going through the various fire accidents in India. You may be aware about the Uday Sivanand Hospital in Rajkot, Shere Hospital in Ahmedabad, Sadguru Hospital in Cuttack, Safdarjung Hospital in Delhi, Dream Mall Sunrise Hospital, Vijay Vallabh Hospital, Prime Critic Care Hospital in Mumbai, and Patel Welfare Hospital in Bharuch. This accident, in fact, draw a lot of attention from all the policymakers, even from the judiciary side. And I started feeling that perhaps we are not playing our role adequately. We are not sending our message to the right person, those who are responsible for bringing the changes, implement the fire safety measures in the hospital. So by going through the KAHO's portfolio, I think now perhaps KAHO can play a vital role. And this is the agency through which we can implement our fire safety measures, because they are acting as a responsible agency and bringing a lot of changes in India. Dear friends, as per National Building Code of India, hospitals and nursing homes comes under the occupancy category of institutional buildings. Various fire safety measures have been mentioned according to the type, height, area at table 7. Besides requirement of a qualified fire officer in the hospital, fire and safety audit by third-party auditors, assets and facility management as per the schedule, and conducting regular fire drills. Dear friends, Government of India had issued various guidelines to the states because they have the teeth through the state acts they are implementing, and various guidelines have been issued to the states to implement all measures. And based on the landmark judgment of Honorable Supreme Court of India, states were asked to make necessary action plan, appoint a COVID nodal officers in the hospital, conduct fire audit once in a month, and also obtain NOC from the department. I hope now all these guidelines and the strict judgment perhaps will improve the position further and reduce the fire accident. Friends, recently the Government of India has decided to operate temporary COVID hospitals from the temporary structures. Accordingly, fresh advices have been issued to the state to ensure that the permanent hospital should implement all the provision as stipulated in the National Building Code of India, and temporary hospitals allowed to operate from the temporary structures should implement all the provisions as stipulated in the IS 8758 or in accordance with the local building bylaws. If they are failing to implement these two things, we have issued the directive that all the fire services should deploy the fire tenders in the COVID hospitals, and in case they don't have the sufficient number of fire tenders with them, they should ask the hospital to engage 24/7 trained fire safety officer with firemen to ensure fire safety of the hospitals. In addition, implementation of electrical fire safety measures as recommended in the CA regulations, beside installation of IoT-based smart auditor to ensure the compliance of IS 72, IS 732, and IS 17512 in hospitals. These are some recommendatory, and if you combine these recommendatory standards with your act, it will become the mandatory one. So we start pushing that hospital should adopt this thing effectively. You are aware that NDMA has already issued a guidelines for the disaster management in hospitals. I will tell you the IMA has recently done some value addition on the request of NDMA for better understanding and smooth implementation of guidelines. Dear friends, in addition, IP University of Delhi has developed 6 hours training course approved by the Government of Delhi for the smooth implementation of training program in hospitals for the hospital staff and doctors. And with the permission of the MS of Safdarjung, They successfully conducted first course, and as per the MS statement, it in fact bring a lot of value additions for their day-to-day working. One case study I would like to share. This one of my fire engineer, he is pushing hard, and he said, "Sir, must mention this case study. This is the eye opener, and this will rather open a lot of discussion points amongst the experts." So he went along with some officers to the hospital in Virar, and he shared that there was no ventilation, neither forced nor natural cross ventilation was there. There was huge quantity of a combustible material. Because of the continuous use of ethanol, he said there was a presence of explosive mixtures, rich oxygen atmosphere was there, and because of the overrun of the electrical facilities, short circuit happened in that particular place in air condition, and due to availability of all high rich explosive material, fire spread rapidly without giving any time to the patients to move out. And this, he concluded, is a main cause. And then he suggested and recommended rather that air circulation in every 8 hours shift, if not circulated with the AHU, and remove all curtains from the ICU. Because what he said, that all these curtains, bed sheet soaked in the oxygen rich atmosphere and supports the rapid spread of the fire. Though I am not personally fully convinced with that, because as per the ICU construction guidelines issued in 2010 by ISCCM, there has to be air circulation. And I believe that all those ICUs were working based on the guidelines and the approvals given to them by NH. So we need more data from you guys. We need more experts' opinion. We need those who are practicing it to ensure that air circulation has to be there. They should maintain it. And if you are still visiting the COVID hospital, please ensure that they are maintaining the air circulation. With this word, I would like to stop my talk here, and I am available for any question and answer hours. Thank you very much, Pankaj Bhai, for giving me this opportunity. Over to you.
Thank you. I think thank you for your setting the tone for today evening's discussion. You really briefed us well about the new initiatives of IP University. Thank you so much. We all know, I think today we are blessed with very knowledgeable audience who are dealing with hospitals. The hospital sterility is also equally important, and the cleanliness, sterility, the pressure gradients which needs to be maintained in ICUs and operation theaters and critical areas of hospital, which also are equipment oriented, play a very vital role. And therefore, between the fire engineer and a HVAC engineer or a air conditioning engineer, it is going to be a constant, I think, interaction. Probably earlier days, there were no synergical or integrated approach, which is a need of our. I think a lot of thought needs to be given. I myself started my career as HVAC engineer, so I understand the subject as good as, and I'm also blessed with a very eminent speaker with me. Vinod Bhai is going to throw light, but sir, you rightly said that the enrichment of oxygen level, stressed up electrical system, many critical areas currently, and particularly the current COVID temporary facilities are being run by very ordinary class state units, which are stressed for 24 hours, and also non-planned expansion of electrical equipments, which can lead to a lot of electrical issues, the short circuit issue. And to talk about it, I will like to call upon my next expert, Vinod Kumarji. Over to you.
I'll be talking about fire prevention measures in COVID areas. What are the common mistakes and solutions? Normally, what we see missing is that the buildings, they don't comply with standards or regulations, and that becomes the first missing link where things could go wrong. Another important issue that we see is the expansion of the electrical system in the areas where there are critical spaces without any planning, and the expansions become a problem. Similar expansions do happen to the medical gas network without any planning, as a result of which you are straining the system, not only the medical gas as well as the electrical system, because of the expansion. Now, the expansion of the building also becomes important because when you don't plan it, you don't have proper time, you don't have proper firefighting equipment. There are criticalities in those areas, and when you do that expansion without considering these major important points like signages equipments and also accessibility to those equipments, all becomes critical and make it more prone to disaster. Similarly, the extended portion of these new areas definitely are forgotten to have clear fire zonings and compartmentation. As such, we are going to make it more prone to the kind of disaster. Medical gas system, we need to also see how important is the distribution into the critical areas. We specify that we should go for area valve stations, control stations, which are mandatory for any critical areas. Why? Because these systems have shut-off valves which can be provided and used in isolation, and also it has indications of the amount of gas that has been consumed. If there are any leakages, you can check it out. It has got inbuilt medical alarms, it's got inbuilt alarm systems, which also is mandatory for the people handling those areas. And of course, when there is a fire, you have the shut-off valve to shut off the oxygen so that the disaster is much reduced in case of an evacuation. So area valve control station becomes an important link to the area which gets the gas in that critical space. Now, there is something going to be talked about. What are these, humidifiers and the outlets at the different beds inside the critical areas? Now, something is always missing in these points are they become unhealthy. Why? Because there are parts in these humidifiers and outlets which are not really looked at because of the improper maintenance. You have to look at the O-rings, issues with the O-rings, you should look at the issues with washers, do preventive maintenance to ensure that the leakages from these outlets and these humidifier bottles are controlled and minimized or even reduced by the way that they're properly handled also. Good trained people handling these probes on these outlets is also important when it comes to the bedside units when they provide oxygen to these patients. Coming to this pendants, when in the medical care areas, these pendants have a lot of electrical outlets as well as a lot of medical gas outlets. Now you need to have a partition between the two. Number one, you have flexible piping connecting the rigid piping from the ceiling into the outlet which is fixed on the medical gas pendant. Now this flexible piping has to be properly installed. Number one, clipping at both ends to be proper and pressure tested, leak tested, so that this is not there is no leakage. There should be regular preventive maintenance in this aspect because many of the pendants are movable, some of them are rigid. But when they are movable, obviously the movement of these flexible pipes inside the pendant will be a critical issue where leakages could happen because the unclipping of these clips will be a problem where the leakages could happen. This is one kind of way you could see in many places how the pendant and the different equipments are connected. The clear housekeeping is not being seen here. A lot of wires, hanging equipments very close to the pendant, and issues of where, plugging, unplugging, housekeeping, all this could be a critical point where a spark could be a problem. Coming to the another important area in the hospital is the main manifold room where the cylinders are being housed. It should be a proper design in the place because positioning the gas manifolds is important. You have the main manifold, the standby and the emergency manifold. Properly chaining possibilities are needed for the cylinders so they don't fall off. You don't have a damage to the cylinders. The cylinders are dangerous when they fall. And second important thing is provide control panels which indicate the availability, the amount of volume of gas that is being utilized, and the control panels to be provided the alarm system. So providing a spacious area which is clear, which is not, it's away from any hot or any positions where combustibility is possible, and have control panels and alarm systems is also missing in many places. Another point is to be talked about is the safe handling of these cylinders. D-type or B-type cylinders, whichever they are, if they are not handled properly, you will get into an accident wherein it becomes a source of leakage of oxygen from these cylinders. It could be leakage from the shut-off valve where we can, close the valve. But if it is going to be a cylinder leaking, then you need to isolate them to a location where it is safe from any combustible or ignition source, whereby you have a control and there is no possibility of a fire happening. So anyway, every time whenever the cylinders are removed and installed into the manifold room or into the equipment, leakage has to be tested. Use soap water to test it. These are simple methods that are generally missing when the cylinders are being replaced. If you can look at this figure, you can see how much of pressure you have in the cylinders. 137 bar is the pressure in the cylinders, the D-type cylinder. So if it is not handled very well, either it is stored in a hot area, or if it falls down and breaks, the valve breaks, there are issues where the pressure could be so high that it could be a very dangerous situation in the manifold space. Coming back from the medical gas to the electrical system, we actually see a lot of extensive usage of extension boards in all these areas. This is because proper planning has not been done in case of the design of the usage of electricity in the critical area. So there is extensive usage. And the next part is the power that comes from your main DBs. Do we have enough tripping facilities, safety protection devices? Do we have that? That is another missing link in many of the areas. Another important point is to be looked at how good is the earthing of the electrical systems in the area, because it could affect your medical equipments, it could affect the people handling those equipments and also the patients equally. Another main thing is, are we having the correct power supply available? Again, as I told in the first slide, electrical expansion in the hospital strains your electrical system because there is no redesigning being done, and then that strain results in a possible short circuit or a fire. Next comes important is that lighting. Emergency lighting is important when there is a disaster. How do you handle it, and how are you able to evacuate your people from the area safely to the assembly point or to another area of critical care? Emergency lighting is mandatory. It's mentioned in the NBC, and the building lighting system has to be designed accordingly. And the lighting either should have a UPS backup or individual battery backup to ensure lighting provision is clear in all those areas. And people with very minimal maintenance, damaged plugs and cords are being used. And as NABH as well as NBC says that we should have regular auditing, which is also a missing factor, which leads to damages and fires regularly. And when it comes to the electrical panels, equal load balancing is important across the phases. So a proper study of the system is important. Use thermography, you check the design load and the connected load and ensure load balancing is very clear. And the maintenance team, when they do their maintenance, ensure they unplug the appliance after switching off the power, even if it is preventive or a breakdown maintenance. All the equipments, if you see any ICU or a critical area or the theater, a lot of equipments are all over the place. Their positioning is very important for easy movement, at the same time for heat dissipation from these equipments, which otherwise be detrimental to the heat increase in those machines and could go into a fire situation. Coming to the air conditioning, as Dr. Shami was mentioning, air conditioning is an important part of these critical areas. Poor maintenance has been missing, is being the main system in many places. You need to have regular maintenance, specifically 30 days or 45 days, the AHUs or the air conditioners have to go through a maintenance cycle. So these preventive maintenance ensures that you're not overloading the motors. Motors are perfectly well and they are in good condition. There are heating controls which are used to have controls on your humidity. There should be proper control mechanism to ensure that there is no overheating which could lead to a fire. And another important aspect that is to be looked at is connecting the fire alarm system to your air handlers and the AC units, and also connecting them onto the BMS system so that there is equal attention from the electrical engineers, air conditioning engineers, as well as the fire team to identify that there is a fire, and then hence the fire has, the HU or the equipment has been switched off. And also fixing duct mounted smoke detectors is missing in many places. These do help in controlling the systems. So thank you, sir. Thanks for this small time, but I've gone through most of the points that are missing in many places. How small corrections will help us to avert all major incidents and avoid a fire in the critical area. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinod. Excellent presentation. I think HVAC aspects. Thank you very much for enlightening us. I think you are the one who is going to get a lot of questions, Vinod, so be ready. Now I'll move to Kirti. Kirti, over to you.
So I would like to thank for this particular time given to me to share across the initiative of a third-party audit, the third-party fire audit as well as electrical audit. Thank you very much, Pankajji. So you have seen the various causes Mr. Vinod has shared with you all in detail, the causes of the fire that can happen, and which is a very serious concern. I've just tried to collate 15 years data available with respect to fire in the country. It was not easy to compile. Most of them have been from some research papers as well as from the media, because we don't have one point where we can collate this data. So you can see that consistently there has been occurrences of fire year on year. I consciously didn't take 21 because the scenario is totally different. We are in a pandemic situation, and that really cannot be a comparable situation to the rest of the 15 years. So in addition to the support of occurrences, which is repeatedly happening, you can also see the initiative of the government agencies in issuing the notices across the country. There's been a lot of awareness and consciousness in the government bodies, so across the states, various states. And this is very much seen whether it is Surat, whether it is Maharashtra, Karnataka, Hyderabad, or the latest case of Kerala, where 206 hospitals have been given notice during this COVID time. The latest news I picked up May 2021. So you can see that there has been a lot of intervention from the government agencies, the regulatory authorities, to see that hospitals need to perform on the safety side. Now, if you look into the reasons, again, these 15 years occurrences studied, if you look into the reasons, why is this fire happening? What is the most probable reason behind it? You can see that 35% of the fire is attributed to the electrical short circuit. Either it is a faulty equipment, or there is a loose connection, or there is a grade difference, or there is some kind of a, human intervention without knowledge, awareness. So many reasons. And the second one is also the air conditioning. So these two take the most probable reason for occurrence of fire across the hospital industry. Now this gives us a awakening. What can we do? So CAHO has initiated to see the possibilities of how to improve the safety performance of the hospitals. So with that objective, with the reasons that we have seen, we've seen the inputs to building what can be the deliverable of a third-party audit. What is the requirement which can go into a third-party audit? So we have requirements from the National Building Code, which defines in the Schedule 4 the requirement for hospital, as Dr. Shami has already given, for various height of the hospital, for the number of beds, for the different levels of the hospital. So there is the guideline very clearly laid down from National Building Code. We also have further legal compliances coming from the Electricity Act, the CEA rules, the National Electrical Code, which gives the information. And some of the hospitals which are very huge, they have the PESO requirement coming in place. They also have AERB requirements coming in place. And then there is also a lot of expectation from the National Accreditation Board of Hospitals to see that the hospitals do conduct a third-party audit. So there is a third eye looking at the current performance of the hospital on the safety side. So end of the day, what really thrives, what really drives CAHO for this particular module is the consciousness towards the patient safety, which is the ultimate goal of every hospital to achieve. And it is definitely a paramount important agenda on the card. So how is this third-party audit of CAHO being initiated. We start getting inquiry, like the hospital scholars, they get to know from different sources. Then we review what level is the hospital in. Is it a 30-bed hospital or no-bed hospital or 300-bed? What is the height of the hospital? So we look at all those. And there is a module that has been developed in the software, which takes all these inputs and generate a tailor-made questionnaire for that particular category of the hospital. And that questionnaire is given to the hospital to do a self-assessment. This has been a very conscious decision of CAHO, though it is not that very easy. We do see that the hospital scholars and us, it is such a lengthy questionnaire and we have to fill this. We don't have time. Can you help us? And so there is a bit of resistance. I definitely acknowledge, people are not easy and free and sitting then there to fill. But there is a very important thought process behind making this online assessment is to enhance the awareness of the safety requirements of the National Building Code and other legal requirements which applies to the fire safety in the hospital. So once the online self-assessment is completed, the report is abstracted and then passed on to the auditor. So we have empaneled auditor, which I will just brief you about. So the report is passed on to them. They have a prior thorough review of the hospital information. It's a very thick report of what is given to them. So they have a thorough review and then they walk into the hospital to do the site audit. So the auditor crucially looks at the compliances and the recommendations what he can give to improve the performance, and that report is finally given to the hospital. Now the hospital is also given an opportunity to put corrective actions through the tool itself. So they can put on all the corrective action with the root cause analysis, which will enhance the confidence even in the hospital as well as CAHO and the auditors to see whether they've attended to these non-conformities, which is observed in a right manner. And then finally, there is an acknowledgement that we have done an audit, third-party audit in this organization, in this hospital, by issuing a certificate. But this certificate is not to say that you're conforming to so-and-so. This certificate is to acknowledge that we have conducted a third-party audit in the hospital. So this is how the flow has been designed. Now, just to give you a little brief on the background of how this whole module has been developed, it's definitely a consortium of experts who have come together in the stakeholder consultation, which we have had since 2017 onwards in Cochin, in Chennai, online virtual meetings, several hours and days we have spent. So CAHO leadership has taken a very important drive in this. And then we had chartered electrical engineers, we had hospital management representatives, we had consultants like MEP consultants, safety auditors, we had inputs from the doctors and the design experts, the architects. So it's like a combined effort of all these experts coming together, trying to understand and then laying down this requirement for the third-party audit. So you can see that these meetings have been happening from time to time, and the experts on the board have been very experienced and giving their value addition in terms of their inputs. So what are the unique features of the two audits that's been rolled out? One is the third-party fire audit. One is that there is a self-assessment, which I've discussed. There are more than 250 questions that is tailored to the category and the level, the height and the number of beds of the hospital. And this is automated, as I told you. The audit requirements are derived from the requirements that is expected to be complied. And there is an empaneled auditors who are, this is the value add CAHO wants to really give. There are more than 45 auditors as of now, and we are open to more auditors registering because the empanelment criteria is very critical and it is very detailed. So not that everybody, frankly, I myself, I'm not a qualified auditor, but I have taken the passion and responsibility to ensure that the whole process, the requirement of patient safety is achieved by enhancing the awareness. So I'm here to look forward the whole process of right from the design, the conceptualization, the design, the execution, till each and every hospital start to end process. So let's look at the unique features of the electrical audit. Again, it has taken the brainstorming approach. There have been site audit from the empaneled auditors, and then these empaneled auditors are again chosen through the set criteria. So you can see that the questions again are tailored to the type of the hospitals. So quickly to take you through the approach. So there is general information in the report. There is mapping of the areas, extensive mapping of the areas with the specialities. And there is online assessment report, which I've told you, then on-site assessment, which is a very comprehensive report. Then there is a verification. Then there is a issuance of acknowledgement of audit. Now, there are 28 audit requirements for the fire audit, which has been considered. It's a very detailed one, so I wouldn't take much of time. So you can see most of them are correlating to what Mr. Vinod has presented to you. And also the requirement of an organization, as a responsible organization, you need to have the planning, the vision, the execution. So you see that all the areas which can contribute to the fire safety, enhancing the confidence part, has been captured over here in the audit requirements. So moving on, as I told you, the selection criteria is very, very stringent. So not everybody can be an auditor over here. You can see that all the 45 auditors, they have been rated as category A, category B, category C, based on the basic qualification of safety that they carry, the total years of experience that they carry, the sectors that they have audited, the number of audits that they have conducted, and association with various professional bodies that they have carried. So this is the hard work behind the model that has been presented to you. So in the fire audit, we have seen that there has been expression of interest and registration of auditors from all these organizations. So you can see from the various regions and parts of the country, you can see that auditors have volunteered and registered, and they have shown their active participation. So what we have followed is, you can see a glimpse that there is a self-assessment report, then there is a scoreboard which says the performance, and then there is also, if at all, there are multiple buildings within the hospital. Each building is audited, and you can see the report coming for each building. So beyond the interest of seeing that the awareness is enhanced, CAHO also wants to see that this audit reaches maximum number of hospitals. Now, how can that be made possible is by making it a very economical model. So on the website of CAHO, you can find all these details. You can see the interest of making the enhancement of safety performance being made possible through a very, very reasonable costing with respect to the height of the hospital, the beds, number of beds. So you can see that is the basis for the rating for the third-party audits in fire as well as the electrical audit. So just to share some of the hospitals that the audit where already it has happened, many of them have shared feedback and they have had a learning experience through the audit. So to give you a glimpse, they are all the various experts who have been, you can see Inspectorate of Factories being represented, architect being represented, the leadership of CAHO being there, the management from various hospitals like Mehta Hospital, Mr. Samir Mehta, Dr. Prabhakar, and you can see that, you know, stalwarts in safety like the DG Fastley, Ms. Nair, Ms. Rachikana, they have contributed a lot in building of this particular module, which you have been looking at. So even the recently installed electrical audit, third-party audit, has had the similar approach. So you can see that the electrical chief electrical personnel has also been involved in the same pattern. I don't want to take too much of time because there's a lot of questions that's coming in. So the testimony speaks a lot about the experience the audit process has given to the hospital. They're happy not because just the auditor walks in and walks out. They walk in making a transformation of the understanding in the team. You can see that there's a participation of a team in the whole audit process. There's a learning process that's happening in the process of audit. So we have had different associates in this journey. We had IBAR, who's doing the software. We had ASSP, the American Society of Safety Professionals, with 118-year-old organization. So they're supporting us in this cause, and CAHO has been very open to growing, to improving this, and for the suggestions to make it the best possible way to enhance the safety. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kirti, for that wonderful, wonderful and very passionate presentation. I think passion is something which is seen in your blood, and also I could sense that immensely the way you have developed this program. I have myself been associated with FSAI Suraksha Index, and we were fortunate to join hands with CAHO, and I had not seen this presentation earlier before joining hands with you. and entire KAHO board. So I must compliment entire KAHO team for coming up such excellent format. I think the self-assessment is the best way to educate and create this awareness, which was long pending in the nation. We have thousands and thousands of smaller clinics, and I was really happy that you are touching even the smaller hospital to large hospital. It's a wonderful effort, and I will assure you that from FSAI, we will come forward with my 8,500 members across the country. Why not we take up this assignment as a special assignment and see to it that the circular which is issued by Dr. D.K. Shami to audit each and every hospital is achieved. More than audit, I think it is a self-assessment and creating that awareness, which will automatically improve the quality of fire and life safety in our hospitals, is something going to happen automatically. So I think that can really complement Dr. D.K. Shami's vision. It is also our duty to ensure that our patients are safe and secured. At particularly COVID time, the serious accidents where a person is going there to take care of his lung, if he dies with a smoke inhaled, is something very, very shameful for all of us who are in this fraternity. So friends, I think next I will go to Dr. Vikramjit Singh. Over to you, sir.
So good evening, everyone. I'm much honored to be the part of KAHO format over here. I'd like to share about the fire incident which happened at the Fortis Hospital, Mohali in the year 2018. That was the non-COVID era. One of our physician assistant who was working with me in the surgical ICU, she observed the smoke which was emanating from the electrical socket, which was feeding power supply to the biomedical equipments over there. So the floor, which is surgical ICU, which was located in the second floor in the block A of the hospital. So immediately she raised an alarm with the console and the code res word announced. So because of a good fire safety program in our hospital, which was headed by the fire safety officers, engineering department, and the monthly mock drill trainings given to the staff and the doctors. So because of the fire safety mechanism, which is a good team over there at the Fortis Hospital, Mohali, who trained the doctors, nurses, and the all engineering departments. So we started evacuating the patients to the other locations in a horizontal transfer way. So because it was the minor fire at the hospital, so with the help of these fire safety who reached in the location, they disconnected first of all the power supply to the affected area, and with the use of carbon dioxide type portable fire extinguishers, they contained the spread of the fire. So in about 7 minutes, we were able to relocate the patients to the other area in a very safe manner. Due to presence of the thick smoke and burning smell in the area, the central command nucleus, which was headed by all the eminent employees of the Fortis Hospital, they reached in the location and they all monitored the evacuation process. So around 22 patients, they were safely evacuated from the surgical ICU, and they were transferred to the adjacent ICUs on the same floor. So with the help of these portable smoke extraction system, we were able to extricate the smoke from the area. And it took about half an hour for the team to remove smoke from the surgical ICU. All about this, the root cause analysis, which was very important. So we came to the light that loose connections in the bedside pendant, which houses patient monitor, gas panels, syringe pumps, they cause the short circuiting and burning power of the socket array and cords feeding power supply to the biomedical equipments. So the spread of the fires was due to the rapid presence of excessive oxygen availability, which possibly leaking from the gas panel. So there are pendants in the surgical ICU where the power sockets are a bedside pendant and burned power cables of the biomedical equipment. They were replaced and the normal operation at the surgical ICU were resumed by the next day. So the engineering team, they initiated exercise to inspect the bedside pendants installed behind the patient beds, especially in the ICUs, to prevent the reoccurrence of the similar incident in future. So when the COVID era starts, we localized the few COVID areas in the hospitals where we took the wards and the ICUs. There we created the negative pressure, and with the help of air handling units, they were managed with the engineering department. In the hospital, to avoid such incidents, we have infrastructure safety and security audit team, which inspects the all areas, whether wards or the ICUs, to prevent the fire incidents in the hospital. So in my point of view, that any fire which is happening in the hospitals are basically from the electrical, because of loose wiring, overheating of the wires, the fluids over the syringe pumps, which give the sparks to the fire, and possibly the leakage of the oxygen, which also creates the sparks. So, sir, I think that any incident which happens in the hospitals, there is always a casual factor in the ICU. The incident like happened in the Fortis Hospital, the predisposing factors were like availability of fuel, oxygen supply, possibly leakage, the electrical equipments around the patient bed, so possibility of short circuiting and short circuits if not checked daily. So fire can be hazardous if there is no proper training of the staff from the identification of the evacuation. Nowadays, in the COVID era, the staff is in PP, lack of regular maintenance of the equipments and the electrical boards, and lack of adequate training to the staff and the engineer peoples. So chances of fire incidents in the COVID era is more. So this was the story which I need to tell you, and it happened in the 2018. With this, I thank you a lot, sir. That's all from my side, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vikram Singh ji. I think you narrated an excellent story, the self-experience, and also updated us with your findings, which are so relevant today. And of course, leakage of oxygen, a nice smoke evacuation system, which ensured that there was no loss of life. And of course, it is all about alertness of the nursing staff. When the first ignition happens or first indication happens, how alert are they? So I think a lot of efforts must be made in future to create this training, and I think training, that is what can make, and it is always a small thing which starts, and if it is not attended at right point. Also, you touched upon an important aspect, small thing, but very important type of extinguisher, which was very important that they used correct extinguisher at right time, and which also helped you to take care of any major incidences happening. So I think fire and life safety is all about having right egresses in place. Of course, sir, you are blessed with very eminent architects designing your beautiful hospitals, but not many hospitals are blessed with that opportunity. There are several types of challenges which many smaller hospital has. I think you all will endorse that. Probably you had good, excellent smoke detection system. Your command center was ready to help and support the nursing staff. Excellent egress routes on horizontal side. All that is not blessings to many of the hospitals today. So we are also worried about those hospitals, and I think that is where KAHO is going to make important role. So next, moving to Mr. T. Samuel Ravikumarji. Over to you, sir.
So thank you very much, and thank you, KAHO, for this wonderful opportunity to share and learn together. And what I would be sharing for the next 5 minutes will be on the complexities of the ward and the critical care, especially the ICU during COVID pandemic. The disaster terminology is a compound disaster. Whenever there are more than one disaster, we call it a compound disaster. So bio disaster with that to add fire is something which is very difficult to cope and manage. So in that line of thinking, we need to look at. So I'm going to look at some of the obviously identified realities that we need to look at in terms of the three salient factors that we look as presented in the Financial Express on the May 5th edition. We find that there have been hospitals are increasing beds in equipment as well as staff, but they are not able to expand electrical wiring at such short notice. And of the 24 cases of hospital fire, 93 people have died and this has been reported by the Nagpur Chief Fire Officer Rajendra Kake, and I think it's a wonderful report that we need to glance into. The second, along with the fire audit, hospital should also undergo an electrical audit. Of 24 fires, 13 had been IC. And most important, the last one that shares is that presence of more inflammable material in the hospital, including sanitizer, vapor, and spills, and more oxygen content, as well as synthetic material made PPE kits. So the whole scenario is a combination of the pandemic along with fire to gather the compound disaster. The next scenario that we look at is a report from London. And in that, they did a look at the real life experience and a study and found that there are significant weakness reported in the ward and the critical care facility with design, equipment, and planning. And the percentage of that is that inadequate fire doors were 20% and escape routes were 60%. We are talking about London. Okay, the escape routes had been only significantly deficit, and the ventilation cutouts had been 17% on a deficit. The ability to evacuate multiple patients simultaneously with limited portable monitoring equipment is significant. Because in many occasions, talking about the complexity of ICU or a critical care or a nursery or a labor room is that it is easy to speak in words, but in reality, it's a really nightmare. Because in ICU, when there is a fire with 12 patients, you're going to evacuate all of them, and how are we going to do that? The challenges are quite high. And the emergency drug supply, you go to some other area, you have surge capacity, alternate care site, but do you have enough drugs to see that the patient's quality care continues? Now, evacuation plans are often limited in their scope. 96% expected to remain on their floor. 14% only had plans to obtain medication after evacuation. And mostly they were not rehearsed. In other words, no tabletop exercise, no simulation, especially for critical care facilities. Staff training were well provided for permanent staff, but less provided for temporary staff, meaning turnover. Any emergency, any ICU, any clinical care always has two components of the permanent and the people who are transit or a transover. And this is one schematic way of looking at our ICU fire safety. I'm looking at that in two words, seen and the unseen. Now, what is that we call about seen? Seen is what you see visibly, that is the patient, the bed, the monitor, your IV cables and IV line cables and all that. What are the unseen or all this? I'm just touching few. It's too large. Your fire resistant rating. What are the material that you are used and how long will they resist and remain and go through the fire? What are your means of egress? Means of evacuation. And what is your occupancy at a given time? And then your stack pressure. Your stack pressure is the chimney pressure of the air circulating. And what you see here is your curtains, the arrow shows the curtains that are vulnerable for fire, the beams that cannot withstand the fire, the air vent, which will again be a big challenge over here, and the false roofing again. So there are hidden, all that is unseen. Now, as a clinician, you walk in, you're not going to look at the unseen because you are trained to look at the seen, that is the patient. So how do we overcome this challenge? Now, we look at this, I would certainly call that as a nightmare. So I wouldn't think of evacuating an ICU. Now look at this. You have umpteen number of gadgets and support system with medication. It's not merely vacating and relocating them. It is continuing the quality of care as we do that, along with the fire personnel. So that is why a coordinated effort is mandatory. So the fire and the healthcare, we see the fire and the doctor here. The fire and healthcare should be trained together. The protocols should be known for each together. Because the fire personnel, the responders are experts in managing the fire scenario. But the clinicians are experts in the clinical patient care. So when they both come together, there has to be a balance while you evacuate the patient. So if you look at a very classic, when I look at Indian hospitals or Asian hospitals, it's not in the book, but I always look at in three categories. One, hospitals which are building new, which can go according to NBC codes and do a very good hospital. Hospital which have been built over a period of time, which probably can renovate a little. But there are hospitals which are very old, which can never touch a renovation. So these are the three types of hospital in our country. So when we look at a fire protocol or ICU and a critical care or ward, it should be across the board for the country. A standardized evacuation, standardized approach that is mandatory, be it a government hospital, be it a clinic, be it a sub-center, be it a district hospital, be it a corporate with a multi-speciality. So key things that you have to look at is the space that are necessary, the egress, the route that you need to take, and the equipment that you need to bear about. So if you look at this as schematically an aerial view of an ICU and a fire in a particular location, so how are you going to evacuate? Which route are we going to take? This is why I'm sure Dr. Lallu will be addressing that in the TTX and the mock drill. The training is mainly on a simulatory ground so that you know and feel what it is. Because the biggest danger in this is not mere fire, but the smoke. Now with COVID scenario, with already patients struggling with oxygen and with the smoke filling the scenario, it's very pathetic and ionic. Like someone said, no water everywhere, no drop to drink. Similarly, it's air everywhere, but no oxygen to breathe. So in that scenario, the smoke becomes predominantly dangerous. So there are certain things that we look at, like expected level of fire safety. In pandemic, most of the rooms are what we call an airborne infection isolation room. So they are contained space, be it a temporary shelter or be it a permanent shelter. Every shelter, a confined space which has people coming in, which is vulnerable for fire, requires a checklist and a standardization. So it doesn't take it for granted that this is what we can do at this juncture. So that is not ethical in disaster management. It doesn't permit us to do whatever we feel like do under the title of disaster. So there are inflammable liquids, and through a spark that can originate in the equipment can really create an havoc, and the component of the oxygen that are vulnerable. And these are extensively reported in the Indian Hospital root cause analysis by Kanchan Chaudhary in the IIT Kharagpur report on it. Now, is there a way out? Yeah, these are the way out which I wanted to, because of time factor, I narrowed down. Number one, fulfill your statutory requirements. The more you sweat during peacetime, the less you sweat during wartime. So if you sweat during peacetime, why are we struggling now? It's because 99% of the hospital globally never had a mock drill of biodisaster. We had mock drill of fire, earthquake, terrorist, bomb threat, fire, everything under the sun, but not the biodisaster. That's why we are struggling at this ground. So fulfill statutory requirements. Remember, National Building Code has been great effort taken with very intricate details. Everything is covered off into that. So application of that. Safety team, a trained safety team. Safety rounds is mandatory, weekly, vulnerable location and vulnerable types. Be alert and aware. Fire and safety audits, it's been wonderfully highlighted, so I wouldn't touch on that. Now, very important is the checklist approach. Why is that there are so many flights, but the air crash is very minimal? Mainly because the checklist format that has been taken onto that. Now, checklist has to be very simple, not cumbersome. It's almost like when you get married, your pastor is asking you, are you willing to marry this person? Only answer yes or no. You can't say I think about or none of the above at that juncture. So your checklists are so simple and so brief that they are checked every day and are prepared. And finally, TTX simulation. Now, what are the challenges and how do we overcome the challenges in ICU? I'm not expanding them, but I'm giving this point for you to ponder over a period of time. You already may have it, but re-strengthening them is vital. Designate a critical care team leader, vital, because your leader should be on the floor and that person should be empowered to evacuate. Now, you can't put somebody there who will have to call somebody, and time is lost onto that. Prepare for and simulate a critical care evacuation pre. Prioritize critical care patients for evacuation. Triage within the ICU, within the ward. In the ward, who all can walk, they will walk out. Who can't walk, you will have to determine. In ICU, if you have a patient with a DNR and a patient who are probably salvageable, then you need to really look at who's to be moved out priority one. So that's very crucial. Please remember, in disaster, in compound disaster, the end result can certainly have certain non-salvageable things. So we need to be prepared for that. So optimal level of life saving is the most important thing to look at. Preparing the critical patient for evacuation. It's not grab and run. It's not load and go, but it is something where you need to prepare and you need to be trained to prepare which support system comes out first, which are crucial to take along with the patient. and ensure adequate power for transporting ventilator, critical care patient distribution. Now, information with the patient, be it file, be it chart, but it's a software, it's going to be in an iPad or in a tablet, it has to go with the patient because surge capacity and alternate care site area, they'll receive and continue the care. And transporting critical patient to the ICU or nearby hospital with MOU earlier. Tracking is very important to follow because you are accountable for your patient. You cannot, we usually use the word called do not relocate the disaster. Okay, because you want to escape it, move it elsewhere. No, the patient you are accountable for, so track down the patient. Operating room, if it's empty, can be a temporary ICU. And three things that we need to look at in any disaster is the money, time, and the resources, including the human resources. So I'm coming to the last slide, which sums up all this, the whole lot into this three way of looking at it. So any ward, any critical care area, be it a no immediate threat, be it an evacuation or an actual, you need to follow a pattern, a system in which you need to go about. Now comes the $1 million question. In COVID pandemic, where do I relocate my patient if there is a fire? Now, very simple answer to that question is, do you have any other place to relocate? In the current context in the country, the hospital are flooded with patients waiting for admission. So you have challenge of having an alternate care site area and the vulnerability of a level 1, level 2, level 3. In level 1 pandemic, you are probably returning them home. In level 2, they can be isolated into a basketball ground or an auditorium or mobilize them like that. But level 3, your critical care is a challenge. You are not only moving the patient, you are exposing a high level infection to the environment. But you need to check the challenge and take a decision. So let me conclude with a high note of thank you for the firefighters. It has been retrospective. The May 4th had been the International Firefighters Day. But I trust this is a good forum for us to thank that we sit at this moment with a cup of tea listening to all that has been spoken because of the extensive preparedness the firefighters are fighting in the country at this junction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor T. Samuel Ravi Kumar. It was fantastic presentation again by you. I'm really blessed with such eminent speakers today. You presented a very excellent slide, one slide which was seen and unseen. And I think one area where I think hospitals should have one thermographic camera. I highly recommend that because that can also enlighten you what all is happening behind the wall and behind the furniture and where the critical cable is getting overloaded. It's a tool which is available in few lakhs, but it can save you big embarrassment of any fire incidents. So that unseen needs to be really now made seen by our visualized by through a high quality thermographic camera, which should be part of our audit process. We know it is a bit expensive, not everybody can afford, but I'm sure we have to make it so popular that the cost of it goes down in my country, and that can happen if society like KAHO is associated with us and they are helping us so that the number of such audits goes up and number of such effective equipments can also go down. So next, I will move to Dr. Lalu Joseph.
Thank you very much, sir. I will quickly go through some basics of fire evacuation for COVID areas and particularly how to go about doing mock drills. And thanks to my dear friend Samuel Ravi Kumar for taking part of that so that I can quickly take you through what is expected. So all of us know the 5 steps to emergency preparedness, know the risk. We know the magnitude of the risk today, but build a team, prepare the plans well in advance, test the plans, and also make sure that you're constantly practicing, update everybody, train everyone. So when the COVID pandemic started, this is something we did start. To be very honest, we prepared our fire safety protocol for the COVID wards and ICUs when we opened the COVID ward and ICU. So the first important thing to remember is the first response protocol. How do you activate? Because the best thing is to prevent a fire from happening. But if you're not able to do that, certainly if the incident happens, you will need to make sure that there is a response mechanism. So what is the first response? Now this is typically in CMC what we do. One person takes the extinguisher, tries to put off the fire, and the other one calls the fire command center, which is 24/7. Now here we also looked at the response from the team that is going in. How do they go in? Because this is a pandemic. They have to wear their N95 mask and rush to the area. Now we've also posted security guards who are on full PPE on the COVID floors, so that they are available 24/7 to handle emergency in COVID floors. Another thing we have told all our security and also our fire team members is to carry N95 with them, because in such emergencies, N95 can clearly protect. More than the entire PPE, it is the N95 and the visor which is most important. So this is what we have trained, and it has certainly helped us. We have had small spark reported or false alarms in the COVID area, and this has actively, helped us escalate. So we have divided the whole thing into level 1, level 2, level 3 fire. Level 1 is just a smoke, no evacuation required at all. It's the immediate response. Level 2 is partial evacuation, and level 3 is uncontrolled, and you have to evacuate the entire area. So we have put down clear-cut protocols for everything. How to activate, how is the announcement going to be through the PA system? What is the role of the electrical, mechanical, AC team, the security team, the fire team? Everything has been clearly spelled out in case of a level 1, level 2, where, how to activate, what to announce, everything has been spelled out. Now this is the protocol. All of us sat down, prepared the protocol. Now what do? It's not just putting down the protocol. We also need to make sure that the roles and responsibilities of individuals are clearly let known. What is the role of the doctors, the senior doctor on the floor in the ICU? What is his responsibility? What is the responsibility of the senior nurse in case they have to evacuate? And also the role of the other doctors and nurses, and to make sure how the patient can be transported safely. So how to triage, as Brother Ravikma said, and how they can be transported safely using masks and critical equipment, how to transport them, shifting them with the necessary pumps, the essential pumps, the bed, how to move the bed, and what is the role of the technicians and technologists in these ICUs? What is the role of the attender, the housekeeping attendant who is there? Everything spelled out in the protocol. Also defining the alternate care site. Where are you going to move them? In case the ICU has to be evacuated, which ICU? You can't move them into a clean ICU. So you have to identify an alternate area, which is also, an area which is attached to your COVID area where these COVID patients can be moved. What is the role of the admin officers, the medical superintendent, nursing, the general area? What is the role of the director, the press, the public relations, the technical managers? Everything clearly spelled out. And also the alternate care site. How to move there? What is the route to take? In case the alternate care site is full, what is your alternate care site to? And how do you move there? Which lift are you going to use? Is it horizontal evacuation? In case horizontally it's not available, how do you move them to the alternate care site? Everything clearly spelled out and put down as a document. Now the documentation part is over. Now coming to training them. Now you circulate a paper like this as a SOP. Will people read, particularly our doctors and nurses? They will say they have read it, but how exactly are you going to train them? That is where our culture of mock drills comes into picture. And we all know how Rescorla saved about 2,687 workers of Morgan Stanley during the September 11 in USA. So we know the essentials of a mock drill, but do we do it properly? So the three basic types, the tabletop, functional, and full-scale drill. Obviously, we can't do a full-scale drill at this point in time. So I would recommend all of you to embark on tabletop exercises or virtual drills. We have gone ahead and done virtual drills and found excellent success with virtual drills. So how do you do that? You get the team together, simulate the situation, ask them like a viva as to what they will do. How are they going to announce? How are they going to evacuate the patient? Which route are they going to take? What is their role in an emergency? And the alternate care site, how are they going to receive? Which is the area that they are going to keep, move these patients into? So you can beautifully do it through a tabletop exercise or a virtual tabletop exercise. And, we have done it umpteen number of times with all the wards and ICUs, the COVID wards and ICUs. And we have found it very, very useful, because once you start asking questions and they start answering, then it is a way of reiterating the protocol, and they also go through it. We do it through Zoom, we educate them, and anybody who's going into the COVID ward or the ICU actually has to go through this protocol. Some of them will go through the tabletop exercise, but at least some of them are aware as to what to do, how to evacuate. So this is the need of the hour, and what you need to put down is the protocol, start training them, start conducting mock drills. When you do this, certainly you will be able to at least manage the situation better than what we have been doing and seeing all these fire accidents that have happened across the country. So the crux of this is it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. So we have to be prepared. We may not have any fire accident at all, but we have to be fully prepared to manage any eventuality if at all it happens. Thank you, sir. I hope I stuck to the time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lalu Joseph. I think it was so fascinating. Without losing time, I'll start picking up some questions. So naturally, the first question I would like to take to Dr. D.K. Sami. Sir, China has a standard on building guidelines of emergency medical facility. Can KAHO, FSI under guidance of MHA create similar guidelines specifically for hospital fire and life safety covering all sizes of hospital and temporary pandemic hospital facilities? Because this is something new which has ended up. Our National Building Code also got revised in 2016, which got implemented from 2017, and all the delegates we had, by the way, more than 525 at some point. All of you must know that the part 4 of National Building Code was chaired by none other than Dr. D.K. Shami Saab. So he has been part and parcel of this entire new code, which has given a lot of emphasis on hospital. In fact, I was told that this code got delayed because of discussions which intensely happened on hospital fire. So without taking that time, sir, I want you to answer that, sir.
Okay, Pankaj bhai, we need some act to empower you to do something. We cannot go and inspect any of the hospital unless permitted by some authorities or authorized by some authorities.
Correct.
So, as a recommended document, National Building Code of India has provision that that every hospital should go for the third-party auditors, third-party audit by the qualified auditors, and they have clearly mentioned that who all can do the audit work. And Government of India has supported their version. And I am being a nodal officer in the ministry. I try to push this versions through the state government, because state government are implementing everything through the state acts. So state act empowering them to visit the various places. So if we will have that provision of third party audit, because I am quite impressed with the KAHO and the FSAI. I think these two NGOs together can do the wonderful job in the country. Whatever the support you need, I can do that. I will become the member of KAHO because I am really impressed the way you people are doing it. I mean, it costs nothing to help and join as a payback to the society. So as a payback to the society, I myself offer my services. If anything you want to do near to the Delhi, since I have some more years to go, so I am ready to do it free of cost. No, nothing will be charged for doing this audit, because I love to save lives, So I think, Pankaj bhai, as you rightly said, that what China is doing, India has already done through the National Building Code of India, through the State Act. The only thing is to get the recognition. And the moment we will raise our voice, probably you will get the right kind of authorization. I will just quote the example, after my circulation of guidelines, the Madhya Pradesh government has issued the directive, and accordingly they're supposed to conduct the audit of a hospital within 5 days, and they authorize 17 fire experts, for doing this work. So slowly things are moving ahead, and other states are also taking it. I mean, MP, where the Fire Act is not very much implemented in the right perspective, but they ordered for the fire audit. Similarly, so many states have also ordered it. So if the KAHO and the FSA can approach directly to the state government, and I'm sure with the way you people have the expertise, they will definitely love to engage you directly for doing the third party audit. And I think what Kirti shown me the prices, it's quite fair. We can implement it a national document, because this appears to be quite reasonable, and it's nothing but your cost towards the traveling. That's all. So I think you people are not charging for your expertise what you're offering. So I am with you as a volunteer, and I'll help you out. Thank you, Pankaj bhai. Sorry.
Thank you, Doctor, for that assurance, and I'm very confident you will go one step forward than what we request you. And I'm very happy to note that Madhya Pradesh government has already taken note of your directives, and I wish that all 29 states and 6 union territories soon implement this. It is a need of our, and I'm sure the CAHO 43 auditors who are already certified, they will do a great service. If this becomes mandatory, they will be the prime movers in the country for specifically for hospitals. So with that, Vinod, I have a question for you. Just like the periodic checks on the sprinklers, how would you recommend automated checks on 12 types of electrical fault that could lead to electrical fires? A quick response from you will be really appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I did touch upon some of the points during the presentation.
Yes, you did. Yes.
Actually, you should see that, is the balancing correct in the electrical system? Is the load balancing correct? That needs to be looked at. Are we having the correct protection devices in the entire electrical distribution system? How about the earthing? Has it been tested? Are we having values as per the desired requirements? That is one point. Then check all the extension boxes that are generally used extensively. That is to be under a controlled system. Otherwise, there will be haphazard methodology of using the power using extension boards. Then also to look at the electrical appliances to be checked regularly for the plugs, whether they are okay, whether the wires have got any insulation damages, there are any problems with the overheating of the equipments, whether the equipments are placed rightly, and if they're close to any walls or any equipment, then there could be heat dissipation, which will be very high, should be a problem of fire. So these are some of the most simple points that could be looked at as part of the checklist.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinod, for that quick update. I think you very nicely summarized it. One of the very major reason for the fire has been also the electrical heaters, which are put in our HVAC system to control the humidity, because on critical areas, we have a requirement of bringing down humidity by 55%. I think a lot of work and a lot of incidences can be saved if you start using hot water in the coil with a heat pump, which is remote, can be remotely located. So what is your take on that, sir?
So I do feel that yes, using hot water can be a methodology to bring down the humidity. Similarly, heat pipes are also used extensively in other parts of the world. But these are all generally expensive, and most people may not be really going for it because the infrastructure that needs to bring in hot water, especially in our countries, will become expensive. One important thing that I would like to also add upon is, yes, it's a good system, we can look at it, but there is another different methodology in which we can look at the electrical heaters itself, that it should have its own inbuilt control scheme, which not only controls the temperature humidity by switching on or switching off the heaters, but you should also have safety cutouts and systems and thermostats which could be robust and tested in a manner that the heaters don't run or don't work when there is no requirement of it. So parallelly, we should look at it. Yes, good projects which can afford the use of hot water or heat pipes, they should try to use it and make use of it, which definitely will not have such a instance of fire coming from the electrical fin heaters. I hope I answered the question.
Absolutely, sir. Fantastic. Thank you so much. So moving to Kirti, you have a question. How can we ensure that we minimize the damages to the property and, more importantly, human lives during hospital fire?
So all the panelists have spoken really at the time of fire, how precious the life is, as well as the asset. It is such an expensive asset that is there in the hospital. But if I have to look at it this way, I feel the saving of life or ensuring that the asset is not lost is not an overnight activity. It's not a last minute activity. It is something which has to be conceptualized right from the design of the hospital. And it has to be coming from the leadership, that the vision for patient safety has to come from the leadership. So if I have to put it this way, that the best way to approach is to have the vision and mission straight for patient safety, for safety in the hospital, which is strongly supported by an organizational structure which is inbuilt with the competency of safety. So it's not like only the fire engineers should know about safety. It should be the whole cross-functional team that is there in the hospital who is equipped with this knowledge. And very important is there should be a PDC approach in the organization. I'm a person coming from the systems background. So last 20 years, I've been walking in and out of several organizations, talking about management systems, whether it is asset management or occupational health and safety, all others. So what we have really seen, whether it is an OEM in automotive industries or in the software or in the facility management or in hospitals, what can really contribute is a systematic approach. The systematic approach is supported by international standards, let's say ISO 45001. It doesn't only talk about occupational health and safety of the patients or of the, it talks about everybody within the premises or scope. So that way, an organization needs to have a long-term thinking, long-term planning, and a strategic approach to management systems. So that is what I feel can really help save the assets and also save the patients at the time. So definitely overnight, preparedness is not a possibility at all. And
I agree with you that long-term approach and a coordinated approach is something which is going to help us in all respect. So next I move to Raviji, you can answer this. We see a sudden surge in fire incidences. We saw a lot of statistical data from earlier with Kirti's presentation, but we see a sudden surge of fire incidents in recent pandemic duration. Is it a coincidence, or do you see a reason for this surge?
Sir, I think there is a pattern, sir. It is not something coincidence, because as earlier stated that there's a high use of sanitizer, there are fuel, there are oxygen high, that the demand is very high. As I earlier said, no, you are equipping higher, not looking at the load capacity of the electrical system within that. So loading them highly, it makes it vulnerable. So there is a pattern. It is not a coincidence. So once it's been identified and then preventive measures are being done, including temporary structures, safety is possible.
I agree with you, sir. But what do you think are immediate precautions the hospital should be taking care so that such incidents are minimized?
So very simple, sir. It is like what the scientists call the tabula rasa. Tabula rasa is the mind, the empty slate of the mind. So imagine if you're walking into a hospital, the clinician mindset is searching for a bed, searching for an oxygen, searching for a trolley and all that kind of thing that happens into that, for the medication. So each one's mindset is occupied with what they have been called for. Nobody is going to walk within looking where the cable is hanging, where AH is running for. The need of the hour is that every hospital should have a fire safety officer, professionally and scientifically trained, who very sight of it can say, my God, there's something wrong in this. That mindset should come. Because all of the panelists over here are all in the field of fire and disaster. So our mindset, even when I go shopping, people, I look at disaster, I mean, highly crowded. My wife jumps on me and says, look at the shopping, why are you worried about disaster? Okay, but the mindset has become like that. So we need a pro-trained scientific fire officer always on the move. And that's the solution as well.
I've already issued the guideline on 4th of May to have a regular fire officer or engage the fire officer. Thank you, Ravi, for supporting me.
Ask Mr. Ravi that do you think, and of course, Mr. Shami can complement this after your statement. What do you think? Do you think NBC code writers, of course, Shami is one of them, should sit down with doctors to identify the problems of fire safety in hospital?
That's very simple, sir. To run a family, we need husband and wife. I think it is, it's the practitioner. Okay, so the misbalance happens mainly because the doctor mindset is only on the clinical and the other, professional, it's two different platforms. But here, the center is neither the doctor nor the fire person. It is the patient. So in the interest of the patient, when a healthcare team comes into the scenario, the ideas can be through so that it streamlines. I'm very thankful to Shami sir. Recently, he gave me an opportunity to develop a protocol and sitting and going through and arguing and looking at. And I should really thank Vinod sir and Lalu ma'am, because my very input into fire mainly because of them only. I never knew AHU and all. I thought some allied high level unit or something like that. For me, all these were new terminology. So I had to really sit. I have bought a book with 1947 edition of fire protection. Some archived book I am reading. I think it's very important that teams sit together and develop.
Yes.
Can I add on, sir?
Absolutely. And then, of course, Mr. D.K. Shami to comment on that too.
I always mention this to Shami sir. Anything has to be a multidisciplinary group, sir.
Yeah,
You
yeah, I
know,
fully agree with. I
yes,
fully agree with you. I endorse your points, and I want to review National Building Code recommendations, especially of the critical areas. Sitting with those doctors, those who are really interested to improve and contribute inside of that. Because few doctors perhaps they are not happy. But not only the doctors, the practitioners like you and Dr. Lalu Joseph, Dr. Ravi, and Mr. Vinod. I mean, those who are devoted to that, and Pankaj Bhai also, because all of you are devoted to the design work. So the moment you'll share more and more information, we can develop and further improve our document. You know, nothing is perfect in this world, and chances of improvement is always there. And how you do that, that depends on how best you are in your coordination, in your reach with the like-minded people. So I am open with you. I am ready to come and talk with you to see your critical area and to evaluate everything from the NBC perspective. I think
you are a different person, and that's why we like you, Shami sir.
So sorry, Shami sir, I was going to compliment, but she has taken lead to compliment you.
it's
Go
all
on, sir. But what I personally feel, Laluji, and of course, Meenakshi, Kirti, Ravi Kumarji, Vinodji, all of you should contribute for the next revision of National Building Code for the hospital section. I think if you professional come forward and help Shamiji to really take out your pains of, and then they are jogged down. I think all of us start critically commenting code after it is published. I think here is an opportunity when we are with sir. I think that is where next revision should go, and all the good learnings of this COVID pandemic. I call it good learning because these are something which are this kind of stresses have never faced by any one of us in this century. So definitely these are the worst possible situation. If they are corrected in our National Building Code, I think we are going to see a brighter light as we move forward. So with that, last question to you, Lalu. Generally, in all institutions, people working are engineering background, you know, and they are always aware of fire safety. But in hospital, most of the people are working are from the medical background, and they do not know much about fire safety, though I think KAHO has taken a good lead to create this awareness. How organizations like FSAI, KAHO can come together and create this awareness?
I think that's a very important point. It is the collective synergy, and KAHO definitely believes in collective synergy. You will understand that we are a group of interested people from all professions, sir. We have doctors, nurses, technologists, engineers, everybody working in hospital as part of our group. And we are more happy if professionals like you come forward and help us and support us, which is what I have been saying in every FSAI platform, that we need to come together, share our expertise, and give the best to the industry that we are working in. Finally, we are all, you know, all of us are born in a hospital, maybe we also die in a hospital. So that's the place of birth and death. So we owe a lot to this establishment. And it is not actually a place where a lot of money is floating around. So there are constraints, there are a lot of restrictions with resources. So we need to work around a system and perfect it with all the inputs from professionals. And KAHO is more than happy to welcome everybody. We have our president, Dr. Vijay Agarwal, who's a pediatrician himself, a very senior professional in the healthcare industry. And I will pass this question to him, and you know, I know very well he'll endorse the point. Vijay sir, over to you.
Yeah, I think you have hit the nail on the head. The issue is this: the resources available in the hospitals are very scarce. That is a very, very important point, and that one has to see. Initially, you see the hospitals were made as a charitable activity, charitable institution. Over a period of time, the whole healthcare delivery has become very complex. And as it has become very complex and high tech, so it has started becoming much more expensive and unaffordable. So the issue is this, that how do we keep pace with safety, and how do you try to drive home also in the minds of the people that they need to budget for their healthcare? unfortunately, people do an insurance of their cars, which is much more expensive than their own body. So it has a very wide ranging kind of a thing, but I definitely feel that the safety in all aspects of the healthcare delivery has to take a front seat. The government has to understand this point, unless or until if you keep on looking at only the L1 tender to, let's say, address the CGHS kind of a pay scale and things like that, this is not going to work. So therefore, I think some people like DK Shamiji is great. They need to make them understand that, what Pankaj sir talked about, the thermographic camera, it makes such huge amount of sense that you need to have it. And all of that costs money. And therefore, I think let us work together to bring about. Majority of the hospitals are not working for profiteering. They want to economically survive and they want to give a good healthcare delivery. So we are with you, sir, and we'll work with you shoulder to shoulder to see that how do we move forward.
So thank you, Dr. Vijay. I think that was fantastic closing remark. I'm really delighted to meet you digitally. We are very fortunate to see you, sir, and that was very inspiring. I think it was a wonderful learning session from KAHO. I personally thank you, Dr. Lalu Joseph, and all your colleagues, your back office, who have done fantastic work in ensuring that we have 525 plus attendees on a working day evening, which is fantastic. And that only shows the importance and sensitivity of subject, which is so important to all the nation. So keep doing great work. Thanks to KAHO, and thank you so much for making
also,
me
sir,
part
we'd like
of this
to
wonderful thing.
We'd like to thank you for your excellent moderation, for the presence of such a stalwart, such a towering personality adds glamour to what we do. And of course, presence of people like Dr. DK Shami, they are so rare to see people, sitting through the whole webinar. You see, and therefore there is really a good exchange of, I would say, ideas with them. And thank you to all the other panelists who have really spared their valuable time and expertise. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you.